All right. Good morning and welcome to another morning episode of the Liberty Dad Podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. I'm your host, DL, America's most objective and currently irritated libertarian. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so early. All right. I'm not going to make a big deal of this, but if you're watching this, you are either watching it live only on Rumble or you're watching it after the show actually aired on either YouTube or X. And yes, there are a few folks out there that are probably watching this on Facebook as well. I don't mean to not give any love there. All right, so what happened is very simple. Rumble now, for the second day in a row, is not sending the feed over to X or to YouTube. And I know that it's connected because I can see the comments on the YouTube channel. It's just not actually getting the feed. And then over on X, it actually, when I go to my profile, it highlights around my profile picture and it says streaming. And then when you click on it, you get no feed. So I know that there's a connection being made. This is on Rumble. This is the second time. I'm not happy. We'll put it that way. All right, so I skipped my morning monologue today because I wanted to get right into the show. First and foremost, let me give you my announcements. September 22nd, 7 p.m., I will be on the Larry Sharpe Show with Ben Weir. We are going to be discussing we're going to be discussing borders. Now, I'm an Ellis Island style borders kind of guy, and he is more of a closed borders. I don't know if he's like full on dead set closed borders. I'm not exactly sure 100% his full position. I think he has some nuance in there somewhere, but we will find that out. I don't know if it's an actual all out debate or if we're just going to have a discussion, what have you. So look forward to that September 22nd, 7 p.m. I'm going to be up late. Well, maybe not that late, I guess. Late would be past 9 o'clock for me since I get up at like 5. Anyway, so let's get into the show. Yesterday, Matt Walsh, he's very angry right now, and he put out a challenge. Now, before I play his challenge, well, maybe not really a challenge. He put out a question. But before I play it, let me address the anger. He is correct in being angry. We all should be angry. Not just angry, very angry. I believe, though, where people are making their mistake is by allowing their anger to cloud their judgment. And they're not making good suggestions. And we're going to be addressing a lot of those today. So in the first half of the show, I'm going to play you this clip from Matt Walsh. Then I'm going to address it. Okay? Now, before I play it, again, if I was talking to Irina's father, sister, brother, or anyone else that might be close to her, and I don't know if she has siblings, I'm just saying, like, if I was talking to her family or anybody close to her, like a good friend, maybe even somebody that knew her from work, I would respect whatever level of anger they expressed. Any level, I would express it. I'm sorry. I would respect it. Okay. Anger is a natural and justified response to senseless loss of life, and many other things too. I could not imagine if that was my child, and I hope I never experience it, because this is not someone close to us. I say we should be angry and maintain righteous, judicious, and wise judgment. Okay, so I don't know Irina. Therefore, I am in a position for my anger to be tempered by righteous, judicious, and wise judgment. Doing that ensures that we avoid knee-jerk reactions that exacerbate divisions among us, that leads to scapegoating, that might lead to vigilante responses, and a whole host of other responses that do not make our society better. So let me be clear. Everybody should be angry. If you're close to a victim, I respect whatever level of anger you have. That's your loved one, your friend, somebody you knew personally, right? And so therefore, I get it. You have an anger that I won't have as somebody who has never even met Irina. As a dad, I'm with Matt on his anger, but I think because we are not close to Irina, we don't know her, we are in a position again to have a different level of anger. Okay? So I just want to make that very clear. And the response that I want from the public is not necessarily one of measured, it's not necessarily measured or compassionate. It's not measured, like I'm not saying, hey, you shouldn't be angry. You shouldn't be this angry. It's not what I'm saying. And I'm not saying that they should be compassionate necessarily either. And I mean toward the perpetrator, toward Carlos Brown. All right? What I am saying is what I want is moral, justified anger and anger that, most importantly, that leads to creating a better society. We can't do that if we're just flying off the handle with our anger. So again, if you're angry and you're not being what I would consider to be reasonable and you're a family member, totally justified. Completely. Right? But if you're not related to the victim, if you're somebody that's sitting away, you need to have a tempered level of anger so that you can make good decisions. So that is the basis for all of my arguments. Any argument that I make is going to be about how do we get to a better society? How do we look at a situation and make good, wise, just judgments? How do we do that? All right, so with that, I'm going to watch this film, and it's about 4 minutes, about 4.5 minutes. I'm going to play it mostly without interruption, and then I will respond to it. Okay, so I'm not going to do a whole lot of interruption on this one because most of my responses are going to take care of it. So let's listen in.
Our current system only gives capital punishment, and then only rarely, to someone who actually kills another person. But what about someone who, through their behavior, has shown a willingness to kill another person? What about someone who is willing to murder another human being just to take their wallet or their shoes or their car? What is the argument? What is the actual argument for waiting until that already violent offender actually kills someone before giving them the maximum punishment? I want someone to explain this to me. If a guy walks up to a woman on the street, or a man, points a gun at the person's head and takes their purse or their wallet, why shouldn't that guy be hanging from a rope 24 hours after he's convicted in a court of law?
All right. I'm going to interrupt here for a moment. I don't want to hear, oh my God, he said hanging from a rope. Okay? Yes, I get it. It's a black guy. Grow up. That's how we used to give punishment, right? Like, yes, it was abused at one point in time in this country, but it was actually a punishment that we used to use frequently for anybody. So spare me any indignation over him using a rope to talk about a black man. If that's you, move along. That's not going to give us a good answer to Matt. Okay? I have no issue with him saying rope. He could have easily said any other punishment, and there are many for which we have used over time. So I just want to make that clear.
Why not? Don't give me some platitude. Don't just shout the word compassion at me. Give me an actual argument. It would certainly make our communities much safer if we started executing armed robbers. If we responded with that kind of brutal decisiveness to violent criminals, there's no question that it would make our communities much safer. So why shouldn't we do it? Here's the question. Is the cost of having much more dangerous communities worth the benefit of keeping guys like DeCarlos Brown alive? Does anyone think the answer to that question is yes? So that the benefit is that we guys like Carlos Brown, we get to keep them alive. And the cost is that our communities are very unsafe and people like Irina die. What do we think about the cost-benefit analysis there? Look, I've been making this point for a long time. As a society, we have two choices. Okay, only two. Either we are going to inflict severe, merciless suffering on the criminals, the violent degenerates, the sociopathic predators, the dysfunctional, the barbaric, or we're going to allow severe, merciless suffering to be inflicted on the innocent. The women sitting on the train after work, the pedestrians walking their dogs in the park, the Uber drivers, the gas station clerks, and so on. One group or the other is going to be made to feel immense suffering. One group or the other is going to be met with brutality and violence. There's no third option, at least not for us. Now, other countries may be able to find a middle path. Japan is one of the safest countries in the world. It's also completely homogenous. 98% of Japanese citizens are ethnically Japanese. They are a small, homogenous country where everybody shares the same culture, same values, same priorities, the same fear of public shame and embarrassment. And yet, even in Japan, the death penalty is mandated in their penal code. They don't use it often, but when they do use it, the accused finds out their execution date on the day of the execution. And then they're taken off to be hanged without any further appeal. So Japan's secret sauce is homogeneity with severe and lethal punishment dispensed on the rare occasion when it's necessary.
Let's just interrupt here, and I want to make a quick point, and I will follow this up later with in part of my response. He's pointing out that Japan has the death penalty, has it kind of worked out. They have a low crime rate, not zero, low, yet they still use it. Ask yourself this simple question. Why would you still use it? Because it still happens. Just pointing that out. Because a lot of people seem to live in this fantasy world where, oh, if we just have the death penalty, all will be well. Well, not really. They still use it because there are still murders there. Just saying, just pointing that out. It may be low, but it still happens. Let's continue.
That is not our situation. We are a very big country. We are, as we're always reminded, very diverse. So we are left with the two options I just outlined. Severe, brutal, ugly punishment of the guilty, or severe, brutal, ugly punishment of the innocent. Either the former or the latter. To choose neither, to refuse to choose, is to choose the latter. It is to say that it is worth it for the innocent to suffer so that the guilty don't have to. And that's the answer that our system has decided on. It's decided that it's better for 1 million innocent women on the train to be butchered in broad daylight than for one violent criminal to be severely punished. And even worse, the people who give this answer have the nerve to call it compassion. It is not compassion. It is callousness in the extreme. It is monstrous cruelty.
Okay. Now, that is, I think that's sufficient to make his point. So I'm going to agree with him on a couple of points. Number one, yes, it is. I do believe his dichotomy here is accurate. You either have like brutality in a sense toward the guilty, the criminals, or brutality against the innocent people, right? So I'm going to agree with him. I also agree that Japan is an entirely different situation, right? Like I mentioned, like he's talking about they're homogenous. They don't have multiculturalism necessarily, right? You know, like I don't know what the percentage is, but it's a very high percentage of the people that live in Japan are Japanese, right? So like I get it. Yeah, you know, they are. I agree with him. They are different. And I also agree that many of the answers do revolve around this compassionate perception. I'm not a compassionate person necessarily when it comes to criminals. I do like to think that I am judicious, that I'm wise, right? That I make good decisions, meaningful decisions. Now, I also want to point out, hopefully you've noticed, kind of dressed up a little bit. like Mr. Walsh there. And that's because I see Matt Walsh as kind of like the conservative dad, and I'm like the libertarian dad, if you will, like America's libertarian dad, and you got America's conservative dad. Now, in truth, I'm actually fairly conservative myself. It is a misnomer that libertarians are necessarily, degenerates or libertines or necessarily liberal or conservative. We're all over the map personally. There are some people who are more libertine. There are some people who are more liberal. And then you have people like me that are more conservative personally. The distinction between, say, me and Matt is not in our view of the world. It is our view in what role does government have in creating or manipulating or in governing, probably is just the best way to say it, the society that we live in. I look at it and I say, there are a lot of areas where government doesn't belong, where we can resolve these issues outside of government, and they will be better. Our society will be better for it. So when I give my answers, they're not rooted in compassion. They're rooted in my view of how our government ought to govern based on, will it deliver the society that I want to live in? That is how all of my responses, all of my answers are. That is the root, right? Like when I think about things, I guess you could say my root is really more from my libertarian view of government and how and what I believe its restraints should be. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the big question that I ask is, what kind of society do I want to live in? And how do I get that society? And I think that when it comes to Matt and I, we actually want to live in a very similar looking society, like the result of it. I don't want criminals running amok. I don't want people, committing crime after crime after crime after crime and just getting away with it. I don't want to be compassionate to a criminal because he's black. So I'm not liberal. I don't want that. What I want is to be more like King Solomon. Remember King Solomon in the Bible? He was known to be wise, and he would make good decisions. And these decisions would create a good society for people to live in. That's the perception. That's what I want. So when you're thinking about all my responses here, I want you to think about it in that context. And so I'm just basically, a libertarian version of Matt Walsh, even today down to how I decided to dress. All right, let's get into this. Why not execute armed robbers? That's ultimately the question. I have 6 reasons. Now, I put these reasons in order of the way I think they will flow in the conversation, not necessarily order of precedence or even order of strength. Just like, okay, let me give this flow, and I think this works for me to go from one to the next. So I have 6 of them. The number 1 is, let's talk about deterrence. I think that it's questionable whether or not an extreme death penalty is actually all that of a deterrent. So when you're looking at criminology, there is this notion of certainty versus severity. Okay, certainty is the likelihood of being caught and punished. Severity is the harshness of the punishment itself. Okay, so yesterday I mentioned cartels, the mob, and even Vlad the Impaler as examples. Let me add one more example to that: pedophiles. It is well known that pedophiles do not last long in prison. So the severity, right? The certainty of that punishment, right? At least if you go to jail. And that does not seem to be deterring people. Just yesterday, I mentioned that here in Jacksonville, who is it? Alex Rosen, I Fight for Kids. He was here in Jacksonville. His team found a pedophile, caught up with him, called JSO, the local Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, had them come out. The man himself had on his phone child porn, showed it to the officers, and the officers let him walk. And it was and Alex made a big stink of it. And ultimately, this was over the weekend, and ultimately JSO actually did arrest the man. Okay? So despite the fact that this man knows that if he gets caught and goes to jail, he's not going to turn out well. Even prisoners like have their limits, most of them. Like they have a line. Okay? And then the cartels, like people still cross the cartels. People crossed the mob if they existed. Right? Jimmy Hoffa, remember? If you're old enough, you remember Jimmy Hoffa. Nobody even knows where he is. And then we have Vlad the Impaler. He was brutally vicious. Does that make sense? He was brutal in punishment. We're going to talk more about him after the intermission here. So these examples are kind of help explain certainty and severity. Now, you could get into the weeds and you could go look up all the criminal justice studies and you could talk about certainty and you could talk about severity. I want to get away from that because the reality when we're having these kind of public conversations, we have to be careful when we're talking about statistics and studies because everybody likes to throw out a statistic. They like to throw out their study, and then guess what? Then somebody else has their statistic and their study, and then we're just arguing over which one is more accurate. And in most cases, most people haven't even read the material. They just grabbed, a number, they grabbed a study, and they said, see, this proves my point. So I just don't find it valuable to talk about them in the context, like an academic context. But I think that the idea is still valuable. So I'm going to kind of break it down in more like lay terms, which is kind of what I do. Matt's focus is primarily on severity. He's like, hey, we're going to execute you for armed robbery. You haven't killed anybody necessarily, but if you get convicted of armed robbery, we're executing you. His idea, the basis for that is that if you commit armed robbery, you have put on the table that you're willing to kill somebody for whatever you're trying to steal. If you want their wallet, you put on the table that you're willing to. So it kind of, in a sense, it kind of makes sense, right? Like you haven't killed somebody, but we kind of look at it and say, well, seems like you were willing to. Now, my argument is that this sounds meaningful only because our system that we have has a low certainty for punishment and, in many cases, low severity. Hence, you get a 14-time arrested criminal who goes on to kill somebody. And this is not new. Like, this is not out of the ordinary. This has been happening repeatedly. We'll talk more about that later. Matt's solution primarily addresses severity, but not certainty. Not as I heard in that clip. Now, maybe in his longer episode, he goes on to talk more about it, and maybe I missed it. And if I did, I apologize. Feel free to correct me in the comments. Matt, if you're watching, feel free to call me out and say you should have watched the whole damn show, and then I will, and then I'll revise my position to include that. But I don't think he did. Right? It's no guarantee that someone will necessarily be convicted. We still have the same criminal justice system. If you just say, all right, we're going to implement the death penalty for armed robbers, people that have been convicted of armed robbery. If you just implement that alone, you still have the entirety of the criminal justice system that exists as is. You have all the same quote unquote rogue liberal judges, which people don't know what they're talking about. Not always. In some cases that is the issue. But you still have all those judges. You still have all the case law. You still have all the lawyers out there that are, reviewing case law. They're looking for ways. A defendant's lawyer, their job is to keep them from being punished or to lessen the punishment. That is their job. You have all of that. None of that is addressed. So, because none of it's addressed, what that means is you can't guarantee that somebody will be necessarily convicted in the first place. So you could still have somebody that commits armed robbery, and for whatever reason, they end up not getting convicted. How many criminals have walked because they had a clever lawyer? If it don't fit, you must acquit. Anybody remember that? How many have walked because of insufficient evidence? They go in and, because our justice system is based on the idea that The government has to prove your guilt. There's a saying for that. Does anybody remember? If you said innocent until proven guilty, please go to the head of the class. Okay? How many have walked because of a failed procedure that resulted in a mistrial? So like, and I couldn't think of it, for some reason I couldn't think of a good example. This is the best one I'm coming up with off the top of my head. I forgot to spend some time thinking about this. But remember the Breonna Taylor case where the police, they went and they did a no-knock raid. They kicked in the door, and then she was asleep in her room. Her boyfriend was on the couch. He grabbed his gun. He shot. He actually ended up hitting a police officer. That all went to court, and his case got tossed out because it ended up being that it was proven well enough, sufficiently, that the police did not announce themselves before entering in the house. And so then the boyfriend, at the time, who was not a criminal, by the way, the boyfriend was justified in shooting because he reasonably had no idea that it was the police. Remember that? Right? Like that kind of thing happens all the time. Somebody fails somewhere along the way, and then somebody who actually committed a crime gets to walk because somebody along the way, the police, the prosecutor, whomever, maybe the judge, whatever, somewhere along the line, somebody failed fundamentally, not a minor failure, but a fundamental failure. And so then we said, all right, you know what? This guy can't be, this guy or gal, they can't be convicted because the criminal justice system did not do its job correctly. So we cannot guarantee that it's going to necessarily result in a conviction. So that's my first argument. The second one, it violates our U.S. Constitution, the protection against cruel and unusual punishment. Anybody remember the Eighth Amendment? I mean, I know it's not popular to look at the Constitution and to care about it anymore for liberals or conservatives. One of these days when I get done with this topic, we're going to get into the issue of the Venezuelan boat. We'll talk about that maybe tomorrow, who knows. But I'm going to talk about that. But we have a constitutional crisis in this country in that people don't understand the Constitution, nor are they adhering it, or when they're told, hey, you can't do that because the Constitution forbids it, people go, yeah, I don't really care. That is the basis for our legal system. That's what protects you from a tyrannical government, like it or not, right? But anyway, let's get back to, we have this Eighth Amendment, this pesky Eighth Amendment that says you cannot inflict cruel and unusual punishment. So we have to have an argument about whether or not killing somebody for armed robbery when they didn't kill somebody constitutes a cruel and unusual punishment. Part of what makes this country so great is that our legal system and our government was designed uniquely to be different from the tyranny that our founders fled. That's what makes it so great. The basis for our law, which Matt kind of talks about, he kind of mentions it in a sense, is Blackstone's ratio, which is it's better that 10 innocent go free than 10 guilty go free than 1 innocent be convicted. I'm not quite saying that right. You could look it up for the exact phrasing. But that's part of what our criminal justice system is designed to prevent. It's designed not to give criminals a free pass. It's designed to ensure that innocent people don't suffer. Wrongful convictions. This is my third one. Let's talk about wrongful convictions, right? Because that's important. I don't want to be convicted of a crime that I didn't commit. Now, while the overall percentage of wrongful convictions may be low, many people have been wrongfully convicted. They have. They've spent years, decades in jail, in prison. That's a loss. So people are asking, what if Irina was your daughter? I would be horrified. Like I said earlier, I'd be I'd be devastated. If it was my son, if I watched the video. I do not recommend you watching the full uncensored video. It's horrifying. It's disgusting. Like I said, we should be angry. And I'm going to describe a bit for you. When I saw her slump over, it hurt. It was horrifying. I couldn't imagine my son being stabbed, looking up in shock, and then a few seconds later, slumping over and dying. I could not imagine that. But here, while people are asking that, let me ask you this question. What if we wrongfully convict somebody and execute a person, a man, a woman, for armed robbery, who was not guilty, and that was your son, your brother, your sister, your mother, your father? What about that? Is anybody considering these kind of consequences? Inasmuch as I never want to have my son brutally stabbed on a subway or anywhere and then die alone, as much as I would hate that, I would equally hate it if my son did not commit a crime, was convicted, and executed. And if I had to watch him hang because Matt wants fucking vengeance, yeah, I would be angry. I would be viscerally angry. But nobody's asking that. Why? Because the people who are not close to Arena, they're allowing themselves to be overcome by emotion. You cry about compassion, yet you equally are being overcome by your own emotions. And you're not even asking good questions. You're not even thinking forward and saying, Matt has 6 kids? What if one of your kids, Matt, were wrongfully convicted and executed? Is that acceptable to you to have the society you want so you don't have to watch somebody you don't even know die? How about that, Matt? Answer that. Answer that, anybody. So that's my third argument. My fourth one, rehabilitation potential. Now look, not every armed robber goes on to become a killer, right? Some of them do, some of them don't. And the inherent notion, as we discussed earlier, in an armed robbery is that killing another person is on the table. But there are times when the criminal has been completely foolish, and they think that the mere threat of force will get them what they want, and they've poorly thought this through, that they might actually have to kill somebody, or they might actually kill somebody. That has happened. Okay? Now, I know we don't want to have sympathy for that person. We don't want to have compassion, because all we care about is getting our vengeance, getting our blood. That's all we care about. But we should care about, hey, you know what? People make mistakes. Dumb ones, egregious ones in some cases. But some of those people come to realize they have made a vile mistake, a horrible one, and that radically changes them. Now, Matt is, I believe, Catholic. Many people who follow him, or many people online, have some religious bent to them. Catholic, Protestant, what have you. Part of religious belief is the idea for redemption. So if you toss that out the window, I'm not interested in your religious beliefs, and nobody should be. Because you are demonstrating that you believe something, that you don't believe something that you say you believe. Redemption isn't only between you and your Creator. Right? We have parables about that. We have parables, the parable of the servants. Remember that one? If you don't, let me tell it to you. I'm going to kind of butcher it a little bit because I'm not reading it directly. But the parable of the servants goes something like this. There was a servant who was who owed something to his master and begged for forgiveness. And then the master, they forgave him. They said, "All right, your debt you owe me, you're forgiven." And then that person went out and their servants owed them, and they showed them no mercy. And then the original master found out that the person that he pardoned was unwilling to pardon people that transgressed against him. So he went and he grabbed him and then punished him. So if you're religious and you're telling me that you don't care about rehabilitation, perhaps you don't need that same spiritual rehabilitation. Perhaps you can go to hell. And I don't mean that in the pejorative sense where, oh, you just go to hell. I mean, perhaps your creator says you were unwilling to forgive other people, to offer them the possibility of rehabilitation when it made sense. I'm not talking about being compassionate and giving we have to look at these case by case. But perhaps your creator will look at you one day and say, you were unwilling to forgive. No, and I should not, I have no need to forgive you as well, because you couldn't follow what you were told. That's my fourth one. Here's my fifth one. More dead victims. Have you ever heard of the phrase, dead men don't tell tales? There's a certain reality to that. If we make the punishment for armed robbery, which is not killing somebody, if we make it death, and somebody is insistent on killing other people, robbing somebody else, they might decide, well, if the risk here is that I'll die, I better clean up the evidence. I better get rid of it. I better kill this person so that hopefully I can get away with this crime. That's a potential concern. So now, this is libertarians operate in this unintended consequences world. This is what I'm talking about. This is an unintended consequence. Will this result? Can Matt guarantee that people who really want to commit that armed robbery will not just start killing more victims in a feeble attempt to get away with it? Can he, let's put it, we're talking about Irina, we're talking about our kids. Can he guarantee that if somebody goes to rob my son or his own children or his wife, that person won't decide, I better try to kill them so that I can get away with this crime? Is that worth it? He asked about the cost-benefit ratio. Okay, let's ask. Matt, is the cost-benefit ratio of getting the world that you want where people infrequently, because I do believe that if we raise the punishment really high, that you will have people, you will have people that will dissuade them from doing these actions. I do agree with that, right? I just don't think it'll do it enough, and I think there are unintended consequences that we have to consider. So, is the cost-benefit ratio of getting that world where people rarely will commit armed robbery, but those who do might end up killing the person in order to get away with it, even if that happens to mean, say, maybe my son or his own family members. How about that cost-benefit ratio, Matt? You consider that? Or are you still operating in vengeance? My sixth point, and I think this is actually probably the weakest one, but maybe it's the strongest one. I don't even know. And this one kind of relies on, this one kind of follows number 2, the U.S. Constitution. You don't have the numbers. Now, I realize it's popular right now for everything that Trump does. People are like, Trump won. He has a mandate. Okay, let's remember something. Trump won 49.8% to 48.3%. Okay, so he didn't really win the popular vote by a huge landslide. In fact, not even a landslide at all. He won, he did win the popular vote, and he won the Electoral College. But the Electoral College gives him the presidency. It doesn't give him the wins on policy thereafter. And neither does the 49% to the 48%. So you still have half the country that's opposed to you. And you're talking about they're all rooted in compassion, or many of them are. You don't have the numbers to even make this change. So why are you talking about it? Why are you spending time coming up with ideas that A, violate our Constitution, B, have serious unintended consequences, potential, the potential for serious unintended consequences, and then C, that you don't even have the numbers for. Why are we having this conversation? Do we want a better society, or do we just want to make videos saying, aha, I'm right, and this person was killed, and all you people are just compassionate bozos? Like, should we not, if we have this platform, should we not spend it wisely trying to make and come up with better ideas that will actually improve our society, that we actually can convince even those who disagree with us that we should go this path? Isn't that our better effort? Isn't that how we actually get a better society? So what is the answer? I'll give you the answer in a simple tweet. It's not mine, but I'll give it to you in a simple tweet here. Let me see. Nope, not that one. This one. Yeah, right here. Remember Rooftop Korean, 1992, the LA riots? So Rooftop Korean is the famous Korean guy. I think he was in a red polo, and he had a rifle in his hand, and he's on top of a rooftop. And so it became this popular thing where a lot of the Korean store owners got on the top of their roof, and they protected their buildings, their businesses, their livelihoods with force. I support it. Here's what he said: no more talk. Arm the populace and let them defend themselves. Enact a federal constitutional carry mandate for open or concealed carry. Leave it up to the individual to arm themselves how they see fit. I agree with this. It's very rare that I will agree with federal legislation because a lot of it is what I would say is constitutionally and pragmatically within the boundaries, or should be within the boundaries of state law and sometimes even local law. But in this particular case, he's dead on. He's 100%. I want you to... Conservatives are the ones who have made this argument repeatedly, and somehow they have seemed to have forgotten it recently. They will say when there's a school shooting, they'll say, hey, this is a gun-free zone. That's part of the problem. Criminals know where to go, where they can find a victim that's not armed and other people are not armed. Well, guess what? And I haven't heard anybody talk about this. Not a single person. And it's kind of sad. So let me show you another a screenshot here. This comes from the Charlotte Authority Transit System, CATS. Okay, this is their rules and regulations. Let me show you something. Boom, right there. This is under the list of what's prohibited. They prohibit carrying, possessing, or having within immediate access any dangerous weapon. Nobody on that train was armed. So, and this is a conservative argument. The conservatives are making this. Now, I'm making it too because I believe it. But they have long made the argument that schools should not be a gun-free zone, that teachers should be allowed to be armed. Well, I'm making the argument that people that are on public transit should be able to be armed. And I'm with, what's his name, Tony Moon, that they should be able to arm themselves how they see fit. You want to open carry? Open carry. You want to carry a rifle? Carry a rifle. You want to put a handgun, conceal carry? Do that. You want to carry a knife? Not really the best defense against a gun, but hey, if you want to carry a knife, carry a knife. Brass knuckles? Carry your brass knuckles. You want to just walk around with a bat? It's a little bit weird, but hey, carry a bat. Fine. I'm okay with that. That is your answer. Because then that addresses the issue of creating gun-free, gun-safe, or gun-free zones. Gun-free zones are not safe zones. They are where innocent people get killed regularly. Why is Matt not talking about that? Why are conservatives not blasting that all over the internet? They're not. It's a shame. But that's the rule. You can't be armed. So now, and I've said this before, crazy people are not necessarily stupid people. You may be crazy and want to kill somebody, and I think you are crazy if you want to kill somebody, especially innocent victims like that, children, women who you don't know. Like, I don't necessarily think you're crazy if you, in a moment of anger, you stab your wife or your husband. Not in the same way as if you deliberately walk into a school and you shoot up a bunch of children. I think that's a far different mental state, right? Same thing for this guy. I think he was in a far different mental state, okay? But I think he was still cognitive, had his cognitive abilities sufficient to say, where should I go to kill somebody? He didn't go to the police station. He didn't go to the local gun store. He didn't go to the range. He didn't go anywhere where he knew people might be armed. He went to a place where it was clearly a gun-free zone. But we're not talking about it. Nobody is. It wasn't even in Matt's. I've been watching Matt's tweets. He has not mentioned it one time. Not once. I'm on my second round. Not to try to play score point game. I'm just saying, if we really want a better society, we need better ideas. Now, the other thing I would say, the other answer I would say on top of all that is not only, a federal constitutional, a federal legislation that says no state can prohibit somebody from carrying concealed or open, or prohibit whatever weapon they choose. In addition to that, I would say we do need to find abuses or failures in our system and fix them. So I have been harping a lot on this guy's mental state because, as I demonstrated in yesterday's show, when we go through the timeline, we can see that at least as early as January, there was a concern for this man's mental health. This is not, in this particular case, it is not, the situation is not that he killed somebody and a bunch of people are jumping to go, I bet he was crazy. I bet he just insanity. That's not what's happening. What's actually happening is that he previously demonstrated and is documented to have a serious concern for mental health in the court system and with his family. It's at least as early as the beginning of this year. It's possibly, it was unclear to me on the timeline, it's possibly as early as 2020 when he was released from prison and he came home and his mother reported that, hey, he's saying weird things and he's being aggressive in ways that he didn't used to be. Get out of my house, right? So the situation here is that we have documentation that there was a concern for his mental health before he killed somebody. That, to me, represents a problem. We have a failure in the system. And if you look up enough articles, you'll find out that there are people in Charlotte who are part of the mental health community that are unrelated to this case that have come out and said, we have failures in our system. We need to resolve them. We have things that we need to fix, right? So I think it's a reasonable conversation to have and say, I think this man was actually crazy. Let's get to the root of why he was allowed to roam free, despite the fact that his mother said there were some problems. He started attacking family members, and he called 911. What was it, in June, I think, of this year? Or earlier this year, might have been January. He called 911 and told them, somebody's putting something in my food and controlling my body. That's not just a simple abuse of 911, which is why one of the reasons why he was let off. That is a concern. When somebody calls 911, if they call 911 as a prank, okay, that's wrong. It's immoral. That needs to be addressed. But that's far different than if somebody calls and says, hey, somebody's putting something in my food and they're controlling my body. Wait, what? Somebody's controlling your body. We need to do something. And then you bring this guy into court, and then you look at his record, and you're like, man, something's up, man. You got out of jail, and you've been arrested several times since then, and even your family members have said that there are mental health issues. We have a problem here. Houston, we have a problem. We need to deal with this right now. There's a problem. Okay? So, yeah, I think there are abuses and failures in the system. We cannot address them if we're busy just being angry and throwing out dumb suggestions. And that's what I think Matt did. I think he came out with a dumb suggestion. All right. I'm not seeing a whole lot in the chat. So we're going to go right to intermission. Then we'll come back, and then I am going to address some other commentary that I've seen along the way. So let me do this. I need to fix that, but that's okay. All right, so we'll be right back.
What's up, Solutionaries? Maj Toure here, founder of Black Guns Matter and the Solutionary Center. We offer basic firearms classes, conflict resolution, and a whole host of other skill sets that are beneficial to our communities all around America. We're able to do these classes because of your voluntary donations. We don't accept government funds. The people that choose to pay it forward to remove the financial barrier to entry are choosing to do so voluntarily. So you can support at givesendgo.com/solutionary. Give it whatever level you can afford to do. Repost the content. Let folks know that we have a community to save and we have to do it ourselves together. givesendgo.com/solutionary. Be safe, be solutionary.
All right, so we're back real quick, and I just want to point out that you can go to Linktree, linktr.ee. You can go to Linktree, look for Liberty Dad. It's in the show notes. You can click on that, and from there you can find all the ways that you can support me. You can go to my Patreon. You can support me through Patreon. You can support me through Buy Me a Coffee. You can also support me by going to the link for Black Guns Matter, and you can get 10% off of the merchandise by using the code LibertyDad. So help out the show. That helps make this show better. That helps me make a better show so that when we want to talk about good ideas, we have the resources to do so, right? And in this particular case, you can go and you can support Maj Toure, who goes out and he teaches the urban community about gun safety, about de-escalation, all the things that we say we want. Go support him. All right, so let's get into this now. Got a few commentaries. I got a few Twitter comments here to address. So let's address them. Now, not yesterday, when it was the trans issue, mostly peaceful memes came out, and they showed a picture. It was the incorrect picture, by the way. They showed a picture of a trans person with a rifle who happens to be an MMA fighter who has committed no crimes, and they said, libertarians will look you dead in the eye and say, we want this person armed. And I was like, well, yes. Why would I not want somebody armed who has committed no crimes and it has no appearance of committing a crime anytime soon, right? Well, they're at it again. Libertarians will look you dead in the eyes and tell you the founders wanted this guy to own a machine gun. And then, so follow up there, then they said, libertarians will tell you this guy should have been allowed to own a machine gun until he killed this girl. No, we don't. How can you argue against libertarians if you can't even get our position correct? He or she then goes on to say, and if she didn't want to die, she should have been carrying her head on a swivel and trained harder. Okay. All false. Completely false. I said this yesterday on the show that this man should have been involuntarily committed and that we should have a mechanism in place for these kind of situations when we say, hey, this person needs to be committed because they're exhibiting behavior that is erratic and potentially a warning sign to future danger. That's what I said yesterday. I'm a libertarian. I said that yesterday. I also say everybody on the train should be armed so that this guy has to think really hard. Is this the place I want to go and try to stab somebody? I could get shot in the face. Right? I've said that. I'm not opposed to disarming people. Now, my libertarian peers might initially bristle, but I'm not opposed to necessarily disarming people because I'm not opposed to detaining people. In the same way that if you commit a crime and we might throw you in jail, you get disarmed. I also say that there is a time and a place where somebody is showing signs of mental instability that we should detain them long enough to determine a rightful, good judgment of their mental state and determine, do they need to be maybe on medication and they have a low risk, or are they a huge risk to society and we need to keep them indefinitely? I said that yesterday, and many libertarians would argue. Now, not all of them. There are some who, and they can defend their own positions. But I'm telling you from the most objective libertarian in America is telling you right now that no, none of this is true. As for the young woman, I do believe that everybody should be armed and everybody should train and they should keep their head on a swivel. I am not willing to say that if for some reason you weren't carrying or your head was buried in your phone, as she was, or that you just didn't train hard enough, I'm not willing to say, and I will argue against it, I am not willing to say that it is in any way your fault. Accidents happen, tragedies happen, right? You accidentally didn't pay attention. You know, we all do it. I prior service, I've had plenty of training, and sometimes I will go and I will sit down and I'm busy with my family and friends, laughing it up, and I'm not aware of my surroundings, right? It happens. We're not all Navy SEALs running around acting like Navy SEALs. There is a certain reality that we have to accept. We're out having fun. You know, some of us might go out and get a little tipsy. Well, we're in no state to be defending ourselves, right? I get it. So I'm not going to condemn somebody for their quote unquote failure to be prepared enough. That's absurd. And I reject this. I reject all of this. Mostly peaceful memes, whoever it is, they have no idea what they're talking about. Let's go to this one. End Wokeness said 0 AP stories on the deadly attack. And then they continue on and they say 0 PBS, New York Times, NPR, Wall Street Journal, BBC, CNN, WAPO, Washington Post, Reuters, MSNBC. You know, no stories on this deadly attack. Now, I think this was early on. I don't have the tweet date, but this has been a big criticism of the mainstream media from the alternative media, is that it blew up all over Twitter and perhaps some other social media, and then we go and we look at mainstream media and we're like, aren't you talking about it? How come you're not talking about it? And you know, that's legitimate criticism, okay? But then I'm going to point this out. So then somebody quote tweets them and they said, how many times did you tweet about this? Man slashes woman's throat on city bus in Tulsa. This happened, this was posted August 3rd, 2025, this year. So early August, a man slashed a woman's throat on the city bus in Tulsa. Nobody talked about it. Why not? Now, the argument from people is that, hey, you know, there wasn't video. I decided not to do this, but you can go do it yourself. If you're on X, you can go on X and you can type in Irina Zarutska. And then you can type in, I believe, until 2025-09-06. You can even do like maybe 05. So you can go and you can filter your searches by date. And what I want you to do, the video came out somewhere around the 6th. But people were talking about this, including actually End Wokeness. People were talking about this prior to that. There was a lot of conversation. Just the picture of her. Just, you know, the couple, the handful of outlets that were reporting it. Mostly local ones, right? This story gained its traction long before, I'm not gonna say long, well before the video came out. So the argument that, oh, we didn't have the video, that just made it worse. But it was actually being talked about and gaining momentum before that. And you can scroll through and you can see big accounts were talking about this, and Wokeness and some other ones. They were talking about this when they only had a picture to work with. So no, it's not true that the video is what made it go viral. I mean, perhaps it really exponentially went viral, but it was already gaining a lot of momentum. And you can look at it and you can go, you can say like, give me the tweets that have her name in it between, you know, up until the 6th of September, up until the 7th of December. And I think it's somewhere between the 7th and the 8th is when you start seeing the video come out. And I think on the 9th is when, maybe the 8th, maybe somewhere in the middle of the 8th is when the video really started getting some traction. Okay. But before that, there was a lot of tweets. I mean, they didn't have like thousands and millions of views necessarily, but there were a lot of tweets from a lot of different accounts already with only a picture. So sorry to burst your bubble, folks, but I did the research. It's not true that the video. Also, and as I pointed out, you can go to Google, type in Black Girl Tragic. Okay? Black Girl Tragic has a list of all the black women that have been killed. Maybe not all, but like a large list. And there are some 40 names just this year alone. Like some 40 names. Anybody talking about them? Like I posted about it. In fact, let's move on to this next one here. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Before we move on to that, So somebody followed up and they said, was he arrested 13 times prior to stabbing? Okay? Doesn't matter. Like, if you shouldn't be more angry at somebody being stabbed because there's video or because the perpetrator was arrested 13 times prior. That should not make you more angry. I mean, maybe a little bit, but that should not make you want to do something like change our laws or look and see where the failure was. That should not make you upset. The core of what should make you upset is that somebody innocent was stabbed by somebody else. Everything after that just makes it worse. I'm gonna point that out. So now let's move on. Here's my friend Dave. I think we're still friends. Dave, if you're watching, I hope we're still friends. But he came out and he criticized me. He said, I can't believe you put this out publicly. This might be your crappiest take. Okay? Now I'll show you the video of what I posted. It was a clip from yesterday. Okay? So then I responded to him, and it'll make more sense in a moment. And I said, let me ask Dave, are you equally bothered when I hold Zionists to the same criticism between Israeli lives and Palestinian lives? Candace and Barclay? Or when I tell black people, same show as above, if white people fear them, then black people have work to do? Right? That's what I asked him. So you might be like, DL, this doesn't make any sense. What are you talking about? So let me play the video that got Dave upset. Okay, we're gonna go to that video and we're gonna play it. Is this the one? Yes. So here's what I said yesterday, and we'll play it. And this is what made Dave upset. I know everybody's upset because it's a pretty white girl. I mean, can we be honest? I don't like saying it, but I mean, I think that's kind of the truth. It's a pretty white girl. That's why people are outraged. If she was a blue-haired feminist that was stabbed, people like Andrew Wilson would be like, you voted for it. I know he would say that because he has said that, right? And that has been said by a good portion of men online. Well, you voted for it, right? That's why people are angry, because it's a pretty white girl. I mean, stop lying to yourselves. All right. Let me turn this music off. So this is getting a little confusing there. All right. So when Dave criticized me for that. I probably should have played the video first. It would have made more sense. He said, I can't believe you put this out publicly. This may be your crappiest take. Right? And so then I responded and I said, hey, let me ask you, are you equally bothered when I hold Zionists to the same criticism? And I showed him a video of, I can't remember which episode it was, back when Candace Owens had Rabbi Barclay on. And she said, do you feel sad when innocent Palestinian children are killed? And the guy couldn't bring himself to say, I'm sad. Yes, it's a terrible tragedy. He went on to blather about, oh, well, I am sad for what we have to do, and I cry for Israel every night. Like, fool, that is not what you were asked. You were asked, is this sad? And he chose not to answer. He was concerned about Israeli lives, not Palestinian lives. And so for me, I look at it and I say, because you're being selective, that means you don't care about any lives. You really don't. Like, you can't say all lives matter and not in a cheeky way. Right? Same thing yesterday when I told black people, I said, hey, you know what? If white people say we're afraid of you, you can get mad and go, that's white supremacy and we're so angry about that and I can't believe that and you're racist and blah, blah, blah. Okay? Or you can go, damn, white people are afraid of us? They're afraid of our young black men? I don't like that. We need to fix that. In the same way that when I criticize Zionists for saying, for refusing to acknowledge that Palestinian children's deaths are important and we should weep for them too. In the same way that I say, you know what? I'm calling you out because you're being selective. I'm calling out black people for being selective and white people for being selective in their outrage. I don't believe in community guilt, right? The collective guilt. I don't believe in that. But there is community outrage. And if you're going to be outraged, then perhaps you think about it and you say, why are we outraged? What can we do about it? Right? If you're outraged that people are scoffing at you because you can't bring yourself to say that Palestinian children's deaths are a tragedy, you should think about that. And you should say, what do I need to do to change this perception about me? Oh, I should probably say unequivocally, yes, When a Palestinian child dies, it's a tragedy. Same thing. When Black Lives Matter gets all up in air about a white cop shooting a black kid, they should be equally outraged or at least acknowledge it. I mean, maybe not equally outraged, right? I get it. There's a little bit of in-group preference there, but they should at least be willing to be angry and say, yeah, if a cop kills a white kid, that's awful. And we demand justice for that too. And white people, if you're going to get all bent out of shape, and you should be, right? Everybody should be angry about these things. I'm not saying you shouldn't be angry. What I'm saying is you should be consistent. And if you're going to get upset over a white girl getting stabbed by a black man, how come I haven't heard a peep about you about any of these other stabbings or any of the black women that have been killed senselessly? Why not? Do their lives not matter? I thought the going thing was to say that all lives matter. Do they? Because it doesn't sound like it. You should be angry about all of them. And if you have some in-group preference, and you're a little bit more angry about one than the other, fair. I get that. That's cool. No issue, right? And hopefully Dave isn't too upset with me here. But this is my problem with the whole discourse, right? People are making comments like, we shouldn't have to live this way. But we have been living this way. A lot of people have been living this way. In my post yesterday, I posted some names. I followed it up with some names. Let me read those names to you, see if any one of them rings a bell. So initially, I reposted someone. Her name was Angela Stanton King, and she said, what happened to 23-year-old Ukrainian refugee Irina Zarutska was horrific, but I've stayed silent because my 28-year-old cousin, Danielle Harleman, was murdered on an LA train on October 10th, 2021, and no one cared. She too sat alone, bothering no one, heading to work. It was at like 5 a.m. Because she was a black American woman, not a Ukrainian refugee murdered by a black man, her life didn't spark outrage or headlines. America is stuck in a cycle where the value of life depends on skin color. We are putting too much energy into in-group preferences. It's not that I have a problem with in-group preferences. I get that. But we should be putting some energy into other lives as well that are not part of the in-group. When Matt says, hey, the Japanese are homogenous, yes, they are. So guess what? They can be equally angry about virtually any of their killings. Here in America, we have a variety of people. Our demographics are all over the place. The answer for us is to say that it's equally as outrageous, and we should be as angry or as loud when who is it? Danielle Harleman is stabbed on a train by herself going to work. That should spark some outrage. It didn't. We should spark some outrage when Dakara Thompson, you hear that name? No, you haven't. 19 years old. She died. She was shot. They don't even know who the killer is. Radaja, I think is how you say her name, Williams, 23-year-old. I don't know if she was shot. I can't remember this one. But she was killed. They don't know who did that one either. I think, well, that one might have been an acquaintance. Of these 4 names, 3 of them were unknown. The killer is unknown. One of them, I think, was an acquaintance. Radaja Williams, 23 years old. Jeremiah Offit, 28 years old. Tiana Thomas, 33 years old. Has anybody heard any of those names? Anybody that's so angry that is just, that they come up with ideas like we should execute people? Where were you when these names were in the media? Even a little bit. Well, how about this? If you're super outraged about Irina Zarutska, show me where you were even close to that outrage for a black woman. Show me. People love receipts, right? We love it when Justin Amash is questioned and someone says, yeah, well, did you say that during the Biden presidency? And then all of a sudden he rolls out a long list of tweets where he was critical about something, similarly with, a previous administration. We love that. We're like, oh man, look at that. He's got receipts like a CVS label, or he's got receipts like CVS. We love that. Can you show even one receipt where you were similarly outraged? Because at the end of the day, Angela is correct. America is stuck in a cycle where the value of life depends on skin color. That's why I posted it. Is it a little insensitive? Dave accused me of being insensitive. Perhaps. But if it takes being a little insensitive to shock you people into being a little more consistent, so that, not because I value principles so much and I want to look and see that you have the receipts. It's not why. If I have to shock you into being a little more consistent so that we can hopefully build a better society, then so be it. I will take every arrow from every single one of you people. I will. Because I actually want a better society. I don't want the Irina Zarutskas of the world to die on a subway alone in a horrible tragedy any more than I want the Danielle Harlemans to die on a subway alone at 5 a.m. minding their own business, trying to go to work. Any more than I want somebody in Matt's family to come to harm, any more, especially, than I want somebody in my family. That's the world I want, and I will fight like hell to get it. And if I have to offend your sensibilities to get you to think about this correctly, then damn it, I will. Because it is that important. The world I want is more important than how you fucking feel. How about that? Yeah, I'm angry. All right, where are we on time here? We got a few more minutes. I want to address one last thing. Okay? Because I keep seeing this. I told you about Vlad the Impaler earlier. A lot of people on social media have been posting Vlad's name. They're kind of posting in the same line as Matt. They're like, oh, if we just had more severe punishment, that's going to answer. That's going to be the answer. And they'll point to Vlad and they'll say, well, and they'll point to this apocryphal story. We don't know if it's really true, depending on the source. Will depend on whether or not it's labeled as true. I think there's some question as to its truth. But supposedly he had a golden cup. Now, let me back up a little bit. If you're not familiar with Vlad the Impaler, he is the 15th century ruler of Wallachia. I think it's how it's said, a region in modern day Romania. And he was infamous for his brutal tactics, including impaling people. Okay? That earned him his fearsome reputation, and he inspired Bram Stoker's Dracula. Okay? So a lot of people keep citing him. And they keep posting like, if we just had a society like Vlad the Impaler, why we would totally get rid of crime. Right? And there's been a lot. Go look it up. There's tons of people that are responding to Matt. They're just making their own post. They're posting pictures of Vlad the Impaler, with the hint, like if we just had this kind of society. Let me tell you why you guys are idiots. You literally are idiots if you're pointing to Vlad the Impaler as some sort of example of what we should do in our country. Okay, so this is an excerpt from the book Dracula, Prince of Many Faces, His Life and His Times, written by Raymond Thomas McNally, American author and professor of Russian and Eastern European history. So he kind of knows a thing or two, right? This is from chapter 4, which is titled A Machiavellian Ruler at Home. So let me pull up this image here real quick, because I'm going to play it. I'm going to read it to you so that we can get an idea of what you are literally asking for. Because I think a lot of people believe they think they know what they're asking for, and they're being absolute idiots. So here's the excerpt from this book. Again, chapter 4, Machiavellian Ruler at Home. It says, nor was impalement the only form of punishment. Dracula decapitated, cut off noses, ears, sexual organs, and limbs. He blinded, strangled, hanged, burned, boiled, skinned, roasted, hacked like cabbage, specifies a German narrative, nailed, buried alive, and had his victims stabbed. He also exposed them to the elements and to wild animals, and built secret trapdoors to drop the wretches on cunningly located stakes below. If he did not practice cannibalism, the German storyteller mentions that he compelled others to eat human flesh, as was the case with gypsies. Does that sound anything like the world you want? It gets even worse. Okay? Here's the next one. But no matter how carefully we account for Dracula's crimes, by placing them in the context of his times and even seeing motivation for some, it is a matter of record that in the end, he was abandoned by all his people. Many of his contemporaries, even his henchmen, felt that no one was really safe from impalement at the hands of this villain. One cannot adopt the adage, tout comprendre, c'est tout pardonner, which I totally butchered, and I don't even know what it means. I'd have to look it up. I forgot to. Sorry. Especially as some of Dracula's atrocities seem to have been motivated only by a streak of irrationality. Dracula, in other words, was on occasion guilty of senseless butchery. So if you are suggesting that Vlad the Impaler is somebody that we should in any way get ideas from, you should not vote. We should not listen to you. You should not talk. You should not be in public. We should totally ostracize you because you are an absolute idiot. You have no idea what you're talking about. You are not going to create a world that's better in no way, shape, or form. You are just an absolute moron. And I don't want to hear anything from you. That's ridiculous. And this comes from, again, an author and professor of Russian and East European history. His book that he wrote. I'm not just making this up. I didn't Wikipedia this. Some of us actually read a lot. And when we try to come up with prescriptions for the world, we draw upon the things that we've read and learned. No, Vlad is in no way a model in any shape or form for our society. And because he was so brutal that, yes, you could argue that the crime rate was particularly low, but he had to be so brutal, so vicious, that even his own people left him. Because they were like, we're not even safe. This dude's just crazy. Let me put it this way, if it just doesn't make the point. If you think Vlad the Impaler is a model for our society, what you're really saying is that DeCarlos Brown should be the person leading our society. That is what you're saying. That's why we shouldn't listen to you. All right, folks, that's my show. Hope you enjoyed it. I apologize if you're watching this at a later time. Rumble is what it is. I'll be looking at an improved solution